The dark net on the trawler Kestrel. We pulled up something that was still alive. I didn't need the engine lights to tell me the net was too heavy. The whole trawler, the Kestrel, was groaning, tilting so far I had to grab the railing to stay upright. Pat, my chief deckhand, was screaming to cut the lines, but it was too late. The steel drum of the winch strained, dragging 300 feet of net from the deepest part of the Greenland Sea. When the net finally broke the surface, it wasn't fish. It was a single, massive lump of something solid, dark, and slick with black mud, about the size of a small car. It hit the deck with a wet thud that shook the entire boat. And then came the sound. It screeched, long, thin, furious, like a giant animal caught in a trap. It was so loud Pat fell backward, clutching his ears. Then the lump moved. Slowly, the netting stretched, and a gap in the mud revealed a wet, glistening eye the size of a baseball. It blinked, fixed on me, round, black, unblinking. And then, silence. Only a dry, steady click click click, like teeth grinding in the dark. That was when I knew we hadn't just pulled up something from the deep. We'd caught something alive. My name's Kane. I've been a deep-sea fisherman all my life. The Kestrel was my pride, an old but solid trawler. That night, we were working the Ruckle Trough, a notorious pit of shifting currents and ancient wrecks. The sea was calm, the sky empty, and the crew was tired. Pat, and two green deckhands, Mick and Dean. It was supposed to be our last tow before heading in. We let the net drop 300 feet, standard depth, for a while everything was fine. Then the winch started to strain. The boat slowed, pulling hard against something huge. The sonar showed nothing. No rocks, no wreck, just weight. Pat leaned over the rail, yelling, snagged a boulder, maybe volcanic. But I couldn't shake the feeling it wasn't a rock. The cable hummed with tension, the metal whining. I figured maybe we'd hooked onto an old submarine part. Scrap like that can fetch a small fortune. So, like an idiot, I told the crew to haul it in. The winch screamed. The Kestrel tilted dangerously. Then the black shape breached the surface, dripping thick mud and seaweed, reeking of decay. The air went strangely warm, heavy. I told the others to stay back. Pat was white-faced. We secured it with chains, but the deck began to sag beneath the weight. I could feel the heat radiating off the thing, like standing next to a furnace. The chains trembled and then, snap, one link unbent itself as if squeezed by invisible fingers. The whole mass rolled a foot toward the middle of the boat, sending us stumbling. "Kane!" Pat shouted. "We're taking on water." The warmth wasn't natural. It was spreading, melting frost off the rails. I aimed my flashlight at the surface. The black mud was drying, flaking away. Underneath wasn't metal or stone. It looked like dark, hard skin, etched with grooves and markings that looked too deliberate to be natural. Writing, maybe. Old, impossible writing. Then I noticed the mud, no, the sand, peeling away and sliding across the deck in small, trembling waves. It was moving on its own, crawling toward the scuppers. Even the sea's dirt wanted to get away from whatever this was. The teeth clicking grew faster. Mick whimpered, "What the hell is that?" I didn't answer. I just shouted for the water cannon. If we couldn't push it off, maybe we could wash it loose. The first blast hit with a deafening hiss. The mud flew off in sheets, revealing more of that gray-black skin, and near the center, a long, thin, healed-over scar. When the cold water struck it, the creature screamed. The sound was so violent the metal walls of the Kestrel rattled. And then, something screamed back. A human voice. Muffled, desperate. "Help, US!" it yelled, gurgling through layers of wet, living flesh. Pat dropped the hose. We all stared at each other, frozen. "Did you?" Mick started, but I cut him off. "Axis. Now." The thing went silent again, steaming under the deck lights. As I lifted the axe, the net bulged outward. Something sharp ripped through the ropes from inside. A single, enormous claw, curved like a sickle, glistening wet and gray-black. 3 feet long. It scraped the steel deck with a sound like knives on glass. The claw flexed once. Then it grabbed the deck plate and pulled. The Kestrel groaned, tilting farther as the monster began dragging itself, and us, toward the edge. I could hear the hull protesting, metal buckling under the strain. Pat shouted from the wheelhouse. "We're going over." "Cut it loose," I roared. "Now." We swung the axes, hacking at the thick ropes while the claw kept scraping forward, relentless. The deck shuddered. I felt the boat dip toward the freezing black water. We hacked faster, shouting over the grinding noise. The final strands gave way with a sharp snap. The boat snapped upright so fast I nearly fell. The creature rolled against the railing, then slipped overboard with a massive splash that drenched us all. It didn't sink quietly. As it vanished beneath the surface, it let out one last sound, a deep, thunderous roar that rattled the windows and echoed off the frozen water, like the ocean itself was answering. Then, nothing but the hiss of waves. When silence returned, the deck was warped. The thick steel plates were bent inward where it had lain. Deep claw marks scarred the metal, glowing faintly with residual heat. The smell of burnt salt and rot hung in the air. We dumped the shredded net into the sea and headed straight back to Reykjavik. I sold the Kestrel a month later. I couldn't stand the sound of the water hitting the hull at night. It always reminded me of the clicking teeth and that human scream buried inside it. Some scientists I spoke to later said we might have dredged up a whale carcass fused with volcanic glass. I didn't argue, but deep down, I knew it wasn't dead when we caught it. Whatever it was, it had been trapped down there for longer than any human memory. Half creature, half tomb. And sometimes, when I can't sleep, I still hear that muffled cry, "Help US," and wonder if it was calling from inside itself, or from everything else it had already taken. The Abyss Walker. The alarm started screaming inside the Argus submersible, not the pressure alarm, but the temperature alarm. It was a high, piercing shriek that meant one thing: heat. We were 15,000 feet down in the pitch-black Japan Trench, and the internal temperature was climbing too fast. The gauge leapt from 50 degrees to 98 in seconds, and the titanium walls were suddenly hot to the touch. Sarah, my co-pilot, ripped off her headset. "We've got a thermal breach. We have to surface now." But there was no leak. I turned our external floodlights toward the sea floor and froze. There, standing on the silty bottom, was a massive, smooth rock glowing with a dull, cherry-red heat. It was an event or a lava outflow. It was perfectly shaped, perfectly still, and then, with a faint shudder, it began to move. The huge shape rolled forward in short, jerky bursts, crossing the trench floor. Every inch it moved left behind a steaming, black scar in the sediment. My mouth went dry. "Captain," I said into the comms, "we have visual contact. It's a massive, hot, self-propelled object. Do not touch the cable. Repeat, do not touch the cable." If that thing melted, the thin steel tether holding us to the surface would fall into endless darkness. My name is Dr. Finn O'Malley. I'm a marine geologist. The mission was simple: collect samples from the bottom of the Japan Trench, one of the deepest scars on Earth. Our submersible, the Argus, was a titanium sphere rated for extreme pressure. My partner Sarah was one of the best pilots alive. We launched from the research vessel Trident just after midnight. The descent took hours. The light faded from blue to black, and the only sounds were the hum of life support and the faint, rhythmic creak of the hull as the water crushed in around us. We hit the bottom around 4 a.m., a vast, silent plain of gray silt. We moved slowly, collecting samples. The first strange thing happened when I lowered the robotic scoop. 10 feet ahead, a puff of silt exploded upward, like something had stepped there and walked away. I froze. "Sarah, did you see that?" She checked the sonar. Nothing. No signatures. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something unseen had been standing there a moment ago. Half an hour later, while we were collecting hydrothermal samples, the environmental sensors went haywire. The external water temperature dropped from 38 degrees to -10 in less than a second. That's impossible at this depth. The ocean can't freeze under that pressure. Before we could react, the hull groaned, a deep, metallic yawn that rattled our bones. It wasn't compression. It was the sudden cold, warping the metal itself. We pulled away fast. The readings normalized, but my nerves didn't. Then, from the hydrophones, a new sound crackled through the speakers, a clear, deliberate tick. It came again, sharper this time. It sounded exactly like a small metal wrench tapping against the glass viewport. "Omar," I called to the surface. "Are you doing something topside?" His reply was confused. "Negative. You alone down there." The tapping shifted. Tick, tick, tick. It was moving around us, from one viewport to another, then beneath the hull. The sound was distinct, metal on metal, like someone testing our armor with a small hammer. My heart hammered harder with every note. "Sarah," I whispered, "it's right under us." She was pale as bone. Then it stopped. For 10 long minutes, there was nothing but static and our own breathing. I almost convinced myself we imagined it, until the temperature alarm shrieked again. The cabin grew hot. The metal walls burned under my fingertips. Sarah's voice cracked. "What's happening?" I aimed the external cameras, and there it was again. The glowing, smooth mass was directly in front of us, sitting on the trench floor, radiating impossible heat. The water boiled around it, sending thick curtains of steam up into the blackness. Through the blur, I saw it move, rolling over, exposing its underside. The surface beneath wasn't smooth anymore. It was covered in straight, deep grooves, like claw marks burned into stone. It wasn't a rock. It was something that looked like rock but moved like an animal, and it had found us again. I threw the thrusters in reverse, but the heat only grew worse. The glowing mass rolled forward, slow but unstoppable, pushing a cloud of boiling water toward the sub. The thin tether cable above us, the one connection to life, began to tremble. The Abyss Walker was pressing against it. Steam hissed as the water around the cable turned to vapor. The steel began to glow faintly orange. "Finn," Omar's voice burst over the radio. "Your cable tension's dropping. It's burning through." "We're trying," I yelled, but there was no way to move. The massive shape had the cable pinned between itself and the trench floor, and the metal was softening fast. A few more seconds and we'd be free-falling into a darkness no human could survive. I looked at Sarah. She understood instantly. We had one last option, our emergency fuel. The Argus carried liquid oxygen and methane for the torches mounted outside the hull. I told her to vent both gases through the radiator, directly toward the glowing mass. She hesitated. "That'll blow us to hell, Finn." "It's either that or the trench," I said. "Do it." She slammed the valve open. The gases erupted into the boiling water, igniting instantly. The blast was blinding, a concussive roar that spun the sub like a toy. The world became white noise and pressure. When the shaking stopped, alarms were still screaming, but the temperature gauge had dropped. The cable was still intact, though scorched black and smoking. The glowing shape was gone. The trench floor where it had stood was a crater of bubbling silt, already cooling. "Surface control. This is Argus," I whispered. "We're ascending. Now." We fired the thrusters and began the long climb. The pressure readout stabilized. The water temperature returned to normal. No more tapping. No more heat. Just the faint hum of machinery and two hearts trying to beat through the adrenaline. Back on Trident, we analyzed every byte of data. At the exact moment the glowing mass appeared, the pressure sensors outside the hull dropped to zero for a fraction of a second. An impossible vacuum, 15,000 feet below the surface. Whatever it was, it didn't belong to our world. It generated heat where there should be cold, silence where there should be sound. A thing made of stone and motion, walking the ocean floor as though it owned it. Sometimes, late at night, I still listen to our old hydrophone recordings. Somewhere deep in the static, beneath the faint crackle of sonar and pressure, I can still hear it, the rhythmic tapping, moving in slow circles. Tick, tick, tick. It's still down there, waiting for someone else to disturb the dark. The silent station Hydrox, the sound that shouldn't be. I didn't need the headphone static to know something was wrong. My partner, Joel, was staring wide-eyed at the main audio screen inside the Hydrox listening post. We were sealed inside a small, steel research bunker 1,200 feet down in the Caribbean Trough, and our job was to listen to the ocean. Normally, the deep sea is full of noise, whale songs, distant boat engines, the popping of shrimp, but the main frequency graph was completely flat. "It's gone, Alana," Joel whispered. "Every single sound. The ocean went completely silent 5 minutes ago." The silence outside was louder than anything I'd ever heard. It wasn't peaceful. It was total. No current, no life, no sound waves at all. Then Joel suddenly slapped his hands over his ears and screamed. He started pounding his head against the console. It's inside. It's inside my head. Make it stop. The click. It's clicking. I ripped off my own headphones, but I could hear nothing except his screams and the hum of our oxygen pump. As I tried to pull his hands away, I saw something terrifying on the audio screen. A single, massive spike had appeared, so huge it covered the entire display. The sound wasn't coming from the headphones anymore. It was coming from inside our sealed post. My name is Alana. I'm an acoustic specialist. For 3 months I'd been stationed here with Joel inside this tiny yellow steel sphere, listening to the endless song of the deep. The Hydrox post was bolted to the side of a deep trench, its only lifeline a thin cable to our surface ship, the Pioneer. We spent our days listening for new sounds, tectonic movement, volcanic vents, whale migrations. It was around 3 a.m., and I was finishing my shift when it began. Joel noticed it first. The hydrophone's green input light was flickering strangely. The gain just dropped, he said. The ocean's getting quiet. Within a minute, all the natural underwater hum faded into a faint crackle, then vanished. The screen went flat. The sea had gone dead silent. Joel leaned in, confused, and then that's when he started screaming. I dragged him from the console, strapping him down as he fought against invisible noise. I turned back to the instruments. The pressure gauge outside was steady, but the internal pressure inside our sealed sphere had just spiked, then dropped back again. It was as if something had struck the air inside our post, like a massive sound wave slamming through solid steel. Then came a faint metallic tick. I froze. It sounded like a small bell ringing somewhere close. I looked around until I saw it. A thin, perfect crack in the middle of our reinforced viewport. Salt water was trickling down the inside of the glass. The sound wave had cracked the viewport. Something outside had used sound, pure sound, to strike us hard enough to fracture steel-reinforced glass. I rushed to patch it, spreading quick-seal polymer across the crack. But as I worked, the monitor changed again. A low, rhythmic wave appeared on the graph, a gentle pulse, repeating slowly. Against my better judgment, I put the headphones back on. Through the static came a voice. Not mechanical, not human. A wet, whispering murmur. Wait, wait, wait. It was coming from the hydrophone, from outside the post, but it sounded impossibly close, like breath against my ear. I tore the headphones off, heart hammering. The whispers stopped, but the rhythm stayed burned in my head like a heartbeat. I turned to the radio. Pioneer, this is Hydrox. We have a hull breach and a medical emergency. Respond. Static. Then nothing. Every system was green, but the line was dead. The silence had spread. Panicking, I grabbed my flashlight, ran to the viewport, and blinked the beam 3 times. The emergency signal for distress. For a moment there was only darkness. Then, far above, I saw a small light flash back. 3 short bursts. Relief flooded me. The Pioneer had seen us. I waited for the winch signal. Then the light blinked again. Once. Then it stayed on. Steady. It wasn't moving down from the surface. It was coming toward us, from the black deep below. I dropped my flashlight, stumbling backward. The beam was getting bigger, closer, cutting through the dark like a spotlight from something alive. It was moving too smoothly to be a submersible. I turned up the hydrophones again. The whisper returned, louder now. Wait, wait. The light reached us. The entire viewport glowed white, water boiling with light outside. I stepped forward, trembling, and saw what the beam was attached to. It wasn't a vehicle. It was a shape, flat, round, and huge, like a massive white disc pressed against the cliffside. The light came from its edges, and in the center of that glowing surface was a single dark circle. Then I saw movement within the dark circle, something pale and smooth pressing against the glass. It was a human face, enormous, distorted by pressure, skin stretched and translucent, eyes completely white. Its lips moved slowly, shaping the word I'd already heard whispered 100 times. Wait. I fell backward, screaming silently as every light in the post flickered and went out. When I woke again, I was surrounded by red emergency LEDs and the hum of winches. The rescue crew from the Pioneer had pulled us up. Joel was alive but unresponsive. Captain Silas, our surface commander, said they'd lost contact for 4 hours. There was interference, he explained. Like someone was flooding the channel with white noise. We saw your flashlight but couldn't reach you. He showed me the final data recovered from the hydrophone. The sensor had been burned out, literally melted, from a blast of acoustic energy no machine could have produced. Then he played me the last recording. It began with silence, followed by Joel's screams. Then came the whisper, "Wait." But right before the recording cut out, there was one last sound, barely a second long. A dry, deliberate scrape, like a fingernail dragging slowly across a microphone's metal surface. That was the last moment before the hydrophone melted. I never went underwater again. I still dream about that face, pale and pressed against the glass, mouthing the same word the sea itself had whispered through impossible silence. I know what I heard that night. The ocean didn't go quiet because it was empty. It went quiet because something older than sound itself had woken up to listen, and it wanted us to wait. The endless chain in the Mariana Trench. We found a wall that didn't end. I didn't need the camera feed to know the wall wasn't natural. My partner, Kent, had accidentally bumped our small unmanned sub, the Deep Scout, right into it, and the sound it made was unmistakable. It wasn't the soft thud of rock or the scrape of silt. It was a dense, metallic clang, followed by a long, heavy rattling that went on for nearly 10 seconds, like 1,000 massive keys shaking in a locked room. We were over 36,000 feet down, at the deepest point of the Mariana Trench. Nothing human should have been there. I yelled for Kent to pull the Deep Scout back, and when the camera stabilized, we saw what we had hit. It wasn't a wall. It was a massive, impossibly thick chain made of dark metal links, each one the size of a car. The chain stretched upward into the black water above and downward into the abyss below, perfectly vertical, suspended in the deep sea. The chain shook from the impact, and as it rattled, the light around us dimmed, swallowed by the dark water. Kent pointed at the screen with a trembling finger. One of the links near our sub began to glow, not from our lights, but from within. A deep, molten orange radiated from its core, spreading like fire through metal. The glow climbed slowly, link by link, lighting the water with a hellish pulse. Whatever this chain was holding, or binding, was beginning to stay. My name is Dr. Leo Vance, ocean cartographer. I was stationed aboard the research vessel Challenger, with only one partner in the control room, Kent, a robotics engineer. Our task was simple: map a 5-mile stretch of the trench that no one had ever explored. The Deep Scout was our eyes, a torpedo-shaped sub tethered to us by a fiber optic line strong enough to hold under crushing pressure. When it reached the bottom after hours of descent, the camera showed an endless plain of gray silt. Cold, dead, silent. We expected to find nothing but small crustaceans and scattered rock. For a while, we did. Then the magnetometer spiked so violently it nearly fried the console. A magnetic field that strong shouldn't exist naturally down there. Kent guided the Deep Scout toward the source, and that's when we hit the chain. The orange glow was spreading fast now, rippling through the massive links. The rattling faded into a low hum, a vibration we could feel through the ship's metal floor even though we were miles above the trench. I told Kent to guide the Deep Scout closer to the base of the chain, where it disappeared into the silt. The camera revealed huge scrape marks circling the base, deep trenches gouged into the sea floor as though something massive had been dragging itself around and around the chain's anchor point. The pattern was too perfect to be natural. Whatever made those marks had been walking in circles, bound to the chain, straining against it, and the silt was still disturbed, meaning it had happened recently. We were both silent, staring at the screen, trying to comprehend what kind of creature could walk the deepest ocean floor. Then, through the hydrophone, came a faint metallic squeak. 2 heavy pieces of rusted iron grinding together. One of the links was moving. The sound grew louder, then shifted into a deep, resonant groan that echoed through the water. The chain was alive with motion, pulled from somewhere far below or above. Each movement sent a wave of orange light climbing higher. The Deep Scout's temperature sensors spiked. I ordered Kent to pull back 50 feet, but I couldn't look away from the trembling, glowing metal. I switched the hydrophone to full gain. Beneath the grinding, there was a pattern, a rhythm, almost like breathing. Then came something else, a sound that froze my blood. A voice. It wasn't words. Not really. But the cadence of them was unmistakable, deep, guttural, and slow. The sound of something trying to speak, filtered through miles of water and metal. Kent whispered, "Did you hear that?" I nodded, unable to speak. We had to collect data, anything to prove what we were seeing. I directed Kent to move the sub closer to one of the cooler links. Using the mechanical claw, we tried to scrape a sample of the metal. The claw barely scratched the surface, but that's when we saw it. Etchings carved into the link. They weren't random. They were symbols, arranged in rows, impossibly intricate for something this massive. The writing shimmered faintly under the Deep Scout's light. Curved lines, sharp angles, somewhere between runes and circuitry. I didn't recognize a single mark, but they looked deliberate, intelligent, ancient. "That's writing," Kent muttered. "Someone built this." The chain was no natural formation. It was a construct, massive, alien, and buried in the deepest trench on Earth. We took as many photos as we could, but the glow was intensifying. The heat readings were climbing too fast. I told Kent to initiate ascent. The sub began to rise slowly. For a moment, it seemed like we might actually escape whatever we'd found. Then the sound changed again, a deafening snap that shook the entire vessel. The fiber line shuddered, nearly tearing free. On the camera, we saw one of the glowing links split apart, a fracture racing through the metal until it broke completely. The broken link, car-sized and burning red-hot, fell to the trench floor, sending up a cloud of silt that swallowed the view. But the chain didn't collapse. The upper section stayed taut, holding steady. The lower section, the one buried in the trench, began to move. Slowly, steadily, it was rising. The broken link lifted off the sea floor, dragging the rest of the chain upward as if pulled by an enormous force below. The silt cleared, and we watched in horror as the glowing metal rose toward the camera. It wasn't falling. It was climbing. I screamed at Kent to engage emergency thrusters. The Deep Scout shot upward, but the rising chain was faster. On the camera feed, the massive, glowing metal surged closer, filling the screen. 10 feet. 5. Then, impact. A violent jolt threw our readings into chaos. The feed erupted in static, but for a split second before it died, I saw it. The Deep Scout's robotic claw was still visible, ripped clean off and tangled in the rising chain, glowing red as it vanished into the darkness above. We lost all signal. The magnetic sensors maxed out before burning out completely. We hauled the ruined sub back to the surface, its hull warped and half-melted. The analysis that followed confirmed what we already feared. The metal wasn't from any known element on Earth. The writing didn't match any human or recorded language, and the sound on the hydrophone, the grinding, the voice, contained harmonic frequencies no biological organism could produce. I don't care what the experts say. I know what we found in that trench. A structure of forged metal, older than human civilization, stretching deeper than our instruments could measure. Something was bound to it, something vast enough to shake the ocean itself. And when we touched the chain, we woke it. We didn't find the bottom of the Mariana Trench. We found its prison door. And now, somewhere in that eternal darkness, one of the links that held it is already broken. The windowless habitat eager. They knew we were inside. The first thing I noticed wasn't the sound. It was the sudden loss of power. The heavy fluorescent lights inside the Eager research habitat blinked once and died, plunging us into absolute, crushing blackness. The emergency red strips kicked on, bathing our small metal sphere, 800 feet below the Arctic surface, in a hellish glow. My partner, Kai, and I rushed to the main power panel, but before he could reach the manual override, the heavy steel airlock door, the only way in or out, gave a deep, deliberate bump from the water outside. It wasn't current. It was impact. We froze, staring at the door. Then it came again. Bump, pause, bump, followed by the shriek of metal being dragged. Screech, screech. The sound circled the airlock in perfect rhythm, slow and deliberate. Kai's hand gripped my arm. "It's marking the hinges," he whispered. It knows exactly where we are. My name is Silas. I'm a marine technician. We were stationed inside the Ejo, a deep-sea habitat bolted to a rock face far beneath the Arctic. The structure was windowless, completely sealed against the pressure. It felt less like a lab and more like a coffin. Our only connection to the surface was a thick power and comms cable tethered to the Boreas platform. Life inside was routine, maintenance, meal rations, status checks. The constant hum of pumps and the muted roar of the current against the hull were the only reminders of the world outside. That noise was comfort, until it wasn't. Around 1 a.m., the white noise began to fade. At first, I thought my ears were ringing. But no, the ocean itself had gone silent. Kai checked the flow meter. The current's still moving, he said, but the hydrophones are dead. Like, something's blocking sound. Within minutes, silence pressed against the walls. Thick, unnatural silence. That's when the lights failed. That's when the bumping began. The scraping stopped, replaced by a single heavy thump that rattled the bolts. The pressure gauge needle began to flicker wildly. Something's displacing water, Kai said, his voice shaking. Something huge. Then the temperature alarm went off. A sharp drop, localized, not global. I followed the reading to a blank section of the hull near the storage cabinets. When I touched the metal, it was freezing cold. And there, visible even in the red light, was a thin layer of frost in the shape of a massive, five-fingered handprint. Something outside, something impossibly cold in the warm depths, had pressed against the hull. I stepped back, heart pounding. The handprint didn't melt. It clung there like a signature. Then the airlock groaned again, and the scraping resumed. Slower this time, more focused. It was circling the hinges again. I tried the auxiliary hydrophone. Static. The ocean remained utterly silent. Then came a new sound, a deep metallic whine, like a drill grinding through steel. It wasn't coming from the airlock. It was coming from above. Kai looked up. It's testing the top bolts, he muttered. It's looking for a weak point. The sound traveled slowly across the ceiling, stopping precisely above each major bolt. It was methodical, intelligent, like a surgeon cutting along an incision line. This wasn't an animal. It was working. We had no idea how to fight something we couldn't see. Our only option was data. Kai powered up the portable sonar scanner, and the small green screen blinked to life. At first, there was nothing but our habitat in the center. Then, movement. Hundreds of small red dots appeared around us, orbiting the habitat in perfect formation. There's more than one, Kai whispered. They're circling us. Then, a massive red signature appeared directly in front of the airlock. That was the one trying to get in. The tapping began. Soft, rhythmic thuds against the door. Tap, 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 like a heavy hand knocking politely. When it stopped, the red emergency light flickered, and for a second I saw a shadow move across the steel. On the door, smeared in dark red, were 3 huge numbers. 4 to 1, 2. Painted, not scratched, like it had been written in thick, wet blood. Kai stared at the numbers, trembling. It's counting something. Then everything went still. The sonar showed the large signature motionless at the door. From the metal came a faint, mechanical clicking, a delicate, deliberate sound, like gears moving. The override, Kai hissed. It's working the external lock. The airlock had a manual release system on the outside for maintenance dives. Somehow, the creature, or whatever it was, knew how to manipulate it. The clicking grew faster. The internal wheel of the lock began to tremble in its socket. We tried to brace it, but the force pressing from outside was immense. The bolts groaned as if something was turning them by hand. We're losing it. Kai shouted. It's opening the hatch. The pressure was already near maximum. If the door broke, the sea would crush us in seconds. There was only one way to stop it. I grabbed the emergency release bar from the wall. The bar was designed to short-circuit the main anchor controls, melting the bolts that held the Ejo to the seafloor. Kai, get to the rescue sphere. I yelled. I'm cutting the anchors. He hesitated, but I didn't. I jammed the bar across the contacts. Sparks erupted, blinding white. The floor lurched beneath us, and the entire habitat dropped like a stone. 4-5 sickening seconds, we plummeted through the dark before slamming into a lower rock shelf. The impact knocked the air from my lungs. The clicking of the door stopped instantly. The fall must have snapped its grip or killed it. We didn't wait to find out. We climbed into the rescue sphere, sealed it, and ejected. The tiny pod rocketed upward through the black water until, after what felt like hours, we broke the surface. The Boreas crew pulled us aboard, shaking and half-frozen. They said the power cable to the Aegir had been cleanly severed, and the cut end was covered in a thick, dark red slime colder than ice. I think I know what the numbers meant. 412. 4 bolts on the hatch ring. 1 central lock. 2 pressure seals. It was counting down, one by one, until it could open the door. Whatever was outside the Aegir wasn't a creature lost in the dark. It knew the structure, the materials, the layout. It had studied us. It knew we were inside, and I think it still does. The sunken sound of the Cyclops. We heard music where there was none. The sound hit me like a physical punch to the chest. It wasn't grinding metal or shifting hull. It was music. Clear, deep, and echoing from somewhere impossible. A single piano chord thundered through the hull, followed by the soft, mournful cry of a violin. We were 900 feet below the surface of the Gulf of Mexico. There was nothing around us but the deep and the dark. Dex, my partner, was yelling, pointing at the sonar screen. "That's not a wreck, Marcus. It's too smooth." The sonar displayed a perfectly round shape beneath us. Massive, solid, unlike anything natural. The violin grew louder, turning sharp and furious, as if something below us knew it had been seen. Then the boat's engine coughed once and died. Every light went out. We were dead in the water, floating directly over the impossible, musical shape on the sea flue. My name is Marcus. I own a small salvage ship called the Triton. My partner Dex is a former Navy sonar operator. We were searching for lost barrels of oil that had dropped from a tanker months earlier. The day had been calm, ordinary, until the sonar picked up something that wasn't supposed to be there. "Perfect circle," Dex muttered, zooming in. "Look at this. No edges, no breaks." It was the size of a football field and perfectly round, sitting flat on the ocean floor. I told him it was probably a sonar error or an underwater dome of gas. But when we tried to move, the image didn't change. The object stayed perfectly still beneath us, locked in place. I killed the engine to haul up our sonar gear, and that's when the first piano chord struck. The entire hull vibrated with it, followed by that haunting violin note. Then silence. I ran to the engine room. Everything was fine. The engine simply refused to turn. When I came back, Dex was staring down at the deck, his face pale. "Marcus," he whispered, "look at the floor." Right by the ladder, a perfect circle of frost had formed on the steel deck. Ice, thick and white, in 80-degree air. I crouched and touched it. Freezing. The chill burned my skin. It wasn't possible. The cold was bleeding up from the object beneath us, through 900 feet of water and an inch of steel. Then came the sound. Thump, 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 like a slow, monstrous heartbeat, pulsing from the deep. The engine still refused to start. The radio hissed with static. The sea was calm, black, endless. Dex's hands were shaking. "Marcus, it's alive." I checked the sonar again. The perfect circle began to distort, stretching into an oval, then returning, as if the object were breathing. And with every shift, the violin changed pitch, harmonizing with the movement. Then the voice began, a single, wordless note, long and human. It rose from the deep like a hymn, slow and sorrowful, impossibly clay. The sound made the steel beneath our feet vibrate. I fired a red flare into the night sky. For a moment, light bathed the sea in crimson. That's when I saw it. Not below the surface, but on it. A reflection that didn't belong. It wasn't our ship. It was in the sky. It was the reflection of a massive chandelier, an ornate, glittering structure with hundreds of candles burning in perfect symmetry. The reflection hung upside down, as if an invisible ballroom lay directly beneath the water, waiting for its orchestra to play again. Then the flare died, and the chandelier vanished. We stood there, frozen, listening to that lone voice echo from the abyss. Then came a sharp metallic ping from the water, followed by a splash. Something small clattered across the deck and rolled to my boot. I picked it up. It was a round metal disc, cold as ice, perfectly smooth. On one side was a tiny engraving of piano keys. On the other side, a single letter, T. Dex whispered, "It threw that up here." The deep had sent us a message, a gift, or a warning. I dropped the coin and ran for the controls. I slammed the starter button out of pure desperation. The Triton's engine exploded to life. But it wasn't running. It was roaring, as if something had forced it awake. The sound was deafening, shaking the hull so hard the lights flickered. The fuel gauge dropped visibly, burning through our reserves in seconds. The boat lurched forward, spinning away from the sonar contact. The engine was driving itself, throttle to the maximum, dragging us from the location with terrifying force. "Marcus!" Dex screamed, gripping the railing. "It's pushing us away." Below, the music surged, piano, violin, and that human voice blending into one enormous, deafening chord that slammed through the hull like an explosion. The sea erupted beneath us, bubbles boiling to the surface. The Triton surged forward for miles, the engine screaming, until it finally sputtered out hours later. We drifted under the faint light of dawn, both of us shaking, staring at the still water. When the Coast Guard found us, our fuel was gone. I told them everything. They didn't believe a word, until Dex handed them the disc. They couldn't identify the metal. It wasn't steel, nickel, or any alloy on record. It was too heavy, too dense, and still faintly cold to the touch, even in the sun. When the data from the sonar was analyzed, it showed something strange. The shape hadn't just stretched, it had shifted position. As we fled, the circular object had tilted upward, as if following us with a single, massive eye. Weeks later, I returned to the same coordinates with new gear. The seafloor was empty. No round structure, no anomaly. The sonar showed only flat mud and silence. But every few months since, I've been woken up by that sound again. A single, low piano note echoing from nowhere. And sometimes, just before it fades, I hear the violin join in, weeping softly beneath it. I still keep the disc locked away in a glass case. No rust, no marks, just the cold. The letter T is etched deep, and no matter how I turn it under the light, it looks like it's been written from the inside out. Dex and I never spoke about it again. He left the coast entirely, said he couldn't stand the sound of the ocean anymore. But I can't stop wondering. The sonar system we used was called the Cyclops, a single mechanical eye staring into the deep. And whatever that thing was, it stared right back. Sometimes, when I'm out on the water, I shut off the engine just to listen. The ocean hums, soft and endless. Then, every once in a while, I hear it again. A single, perfect piano note echoing up through the hull, reminding me that something ancient and musical is still alive down there, waiting for the next listener to drift above its stage.